This is Peter Helland with Gus Silke on the show Israel, and in the room here with us is Kendra and Judy, who went with us in November of 2016 to Nabi Saleh, the West Bank, and this was an official trip of mercy that was the follow-through from the prior year where we met up in the Green Bay area with a lot of bishop from Uganda. We had people from Milwaukee, Baltimore, Mayor Lickey. We had from the mayor's office.
Also Ferguson, Missouri.
Yeah.
Father Jack from Ferguson, who was the priest there during the Troubles there. That was and indeed the Pilgrimage of Mercy was his initiative with me. He left Green Bay saying, I would really like the next grouping meeting be in the West Bank near Bassem Tamimi's village, and I had no idea how that was going to happen.
Right.
You know, he left that conference in Green Bay, and then over time it kind of fell together with face-to-face fine art commemorative expressions with Ann Jones, and the possibility of doing portraits of people who had died in the violence in the Holy Land dawned on us. And we combined that with the fact that Pope Francis had called a year of mercy for the Catholic Church. And so we entitled it ultimately Pilgrimage of Mercy. And we gave portraits to both Israeli families who lost soldiers, as well as Palestinian family members who had lost family members in the violence in the Holy Land. And we did a peace conference also in the village of Nabi Saleh.
Right. And right now it is Christmas season, and when I was there I bought a nice statue with Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, and we had it on a show a couple months ago. We can't find it, okay? But this is the exact time right now of the Christmas story, which I think I want to just touch on, okay? So in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to the city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And he came to her and said, Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you. But she was greatly troubled at the saying, and considered in her mind what sort of greeting this might be. And the angel said to her, Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David. And he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. Now, the reason I read that is that Christian Zionism, which has basically been American foreign policy driven by that religious view, says that Jesus was not given the throne of David, and that will only happen yet in the future sometime. Okay? And Scofield's Bible, which I was given one, a lot of people were given one as their first Bible. Because I was Catholic, we were not given Bibles, a lot of people, pre-Vatican II. So the first one I got was a Scofield Bible. And in the footnotes, in the intro to the Gospels, it says, this is a Catholic belief that Jesus is sitting now on the throne of David. And it's a Catholic belief that Israel, the true Israel now, is the church. This is wrong, okay? Now, this is overturning a lot of Christianity for 19 centuries. But the trauma of the French Revolution and the American Revolution, which is American Civil War, which is oftentimes called the Second French Revolution, caused people to like have amnesia in their faith, and they accepted this teaching. Okay, so that's Gospel of Luke. Now, when you go into Matthew, it brings it even more into focus. Okay. Now, the reason I say this is that right now we're dealing with Israel being, put it mildly, disproportional in their attack on Gaza. Okay? Now, whether Hamas, there was a stand down with Hamas coming in, or whether there wasn't, it's still disproportional. Okay? And so it's driven, and Netanyahu will say, his support comes mainly from American Christians. Israel gets their support from America. And it's American Christians who hold a Schofield understanding that the Jews are going to return back to their land, and this is in fulfillment of prophecy. And around this time, the church will be raptured out, and after 7 years, the church will come back with Jesus and set up the millennial reign, and then he will set up the throne. He'll sit on the throne of David at that time, and that time only. So right now, this promise of Gabriel to Mary has not happened yet, which it was assumed that it happened right then, when he ascended into heaven. Acts chapter 2 says Jesus sits on the throne of David. It's plain as day, but nope, doesn't say it, I guess. Okay? So, Matthew says it this. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, chapter 2 of Matthew, when he was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. O you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will govern my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. When they had heard the king, they went their way. And behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them till it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there till I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. He rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Out of Egypt have I called my son. Hosea chapter 11, verse 1. So Matthew is reading these Old Testament scriptures and putting it together. Matthew is the official interpretation of the Old Testament. And what was the passage in Hosea? Chapter 11, verse 1. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Matthew is saying that was a prophecy, and it was fulfilled only when Joseph was called back out of Egypt to go back after Herod had died. Okay, so what's this saying? That's why I've had this show for a long time called Israel, for one reason. To point out that Schofield is wrong. That the church is the true Israel. And why is the church the true Israel? Because the promise to Abraham that he would inherit the world was not just to Abraham. It was to Abraham and his seed. The Jews missed it. Paul was killing Christians because he missed it. Saul is converted on the Damascus Road, and God shows him many things, but the main thing he showed him was, Saul, look at that scripture in Genesis. It says the promise is to Abraham and his seed, singular. Not plural, singular. So the promise is the the Messiah. To the Messiah. So only if you're in the Messiah can you inherit that promise. Now the Jews have an argument, but it's quickly extinguished. Why? Because, well, you guys are not ethnic. You're not really a Jew. Well, hold it here. If I'm in Christ, who is a true Jew, whose lineage is certified, get the whole lineage from Joseph all the way back. We have the lineage of Mary all the way back. So Jesus is a certified, authentic Jew with all his lineage. And when you come into Christ, you come into all of Christ. You come into his ethnicity. You are adopted into that also. So if you come to Christ, you are truly promised that inheritance of the next world, the new heaven and the new earth, with a new glorified body. That was Paul's excitement. He saw it. Okay? So the promise that Jesus is the true Israel. In Israel, the nation was called the firstborn. Jesus is the firstborn. If we get a chance, maybe we will. The whole idea of the firstborn, the right of the firstborn son, is a powerful concept that used to dominate Western countries. So if anybody had their firstborn son, then it was dominant. And we see that in the next thing coming up as far as next week in church. I believe it's about next week. Luke chapter 2:22. And when the time came for their purification according to the law of Moses, they brought Jesus up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as it is written in the law of the Lord. Every male that opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. Okay? So this is where you get the right, the whole promise, the right of the firstborn, which goes back to Deuteronomy. But that's another aspect that we should keep in mind as we look at the Christmas story and at the gospel, and that how Jesus brings peace and the gospel brings peace. The question is, why do you think it brings peace?
Why does the gospel bring peace?
And I'm going to hit you hard, but what is peace? Okay, at all levels. You name the level: political, spiritual, psychological. What is peace?
Okay. Well, St. Augustine said peace is order in relationships. That's a simple definition that can be applied in various ways to various human situations, starting maybe with the family, and then to the village, and then to the greater social groups. You
always say that Father Hesburgh, there's different views on Father Hesburgh, but you always said he said it starts in the family. That's very biblical. You can't be an elder in the church unless you have proven you can manage and order your family properly.
Yeah. Father Hesburgh spent a lot of time encouraging, especially after World War II. He was the chaplain at Vetville, which was the married veterans that had come back from the war and were finishing their schooling at Notre Dame.
Now, my uncle came back from the war in '46. He claims he hunted with Father Hesburgh. But he wasn't married.
Well, it's possible that Father Hesburgh wasn't just friends with people who were married. He happened to be the chaplain at Vetville. He had many hats he had to wear. So he certainly knew students that were single too.
Well, my uncle first went to the Marines at 17.
Okay.
And so then after he's done...
Was he allowed to be in the Marines at 17?
Yeah.
Okay.
People could get in. That's what I was told. It was 17. Okay. Maybe not. Maybe it was 18, but I was told 17.
Okay.
But he did the Marines first. Then he went to Notre Dame.
Right.
So a vet, he would have come across Hesburgh probably.
Oh, certainly.
Being a vet.
Yeah, and it's totally possible that. Yeah. What I'm saying is that Hesburgh's orientation toward helping families really begins in a dramatic way in Vettville. And I have a story about that because I used to visit an elderly nun who was dying at the infirmary at St. Mary's, and she knew Father Hesburgh, and she helped care for the student infirmary for a while at Notre Dame. But she said that during that time in the 1940s, Father Hesburgh would be very concerned, for example, if a family had more than one child, he would help them get diapers and things like that. It was very practical, very concerned for these people. It wasn't pie in the sky theology. It was like take care of things that needed to happen. And one of his most famous points that he would make to the men was this: how do you best take care of your children? And he would answer, love their mother. That's the best way a man can take care of his children.
Let me add further to that. In other words, we just said, Augustine said, peace comes from when things are ordered right.
Order in relationships, right.
Now, the number one would obviously be, it's like computers, 0, 1, 0, 1. The obvious would be the husband-wife. Okay? If that's not ordered right, now, how do we know what's right? Well, the Scripture and church teaching.
Right.
Okay? So if the husband-wife relationship, and I just saw that the Methodist Church in Britain just said we can't use the words husband and wife anymore. It's too offensive to a lot of people. Okay. Well, that's where we're at. The Methodist Church became the biggest church in America for a long time, came from Britain. Okay. Now, they're not too far behind. So they're not concerned about ordering. You can't have peace unless it's ordered right. You could try, and it's not going to happen if Augustine's definition holds. Okay? But once you order the husband-wife relationship, which is not easy, it's very hard in today's world. But if you don't get it ordered right, forget peace. It's not going to happen because the children are going to be created out of a disordered relationship. Now, what's your comment on that?
Well, obviously, we need church wisdom and the wisdom of Scripture and Christian tradition to guide our way. We need the journey of insight into the core of a real and true definition of love, radical love. You know, the kind of self-emptying love that Jesus taught in Philippians 2. His state was divine. He did not cling to equality with God, but he emptied himself, and so on. It's this movement of radical love, self-emptying love. And obviously, both are called to that love in a marriage relationship, and both are really called to respect one another's distinct roles in that relationship too. And that's what people get into trouble with now. I mean, people maybe get tired of the story about my mother, who was a championship golfer, but it shows something about nature that I've never forgotten. A friend of mine took me out golfing, and he complained about my swing. He said, "You're not playing golf here, you're playing girlf. You're hitting that ball not like a man, but like a woman." And I told my mother that, and she loved it. She thought, no, that's exactly right. Because she knew the game of golf. She was a championship. She was Appleton City women's champ 9 years. You know, she was a serious golfer. And she said, yeah. But then I told another friend of mine what was said, and I was corrected right away for how terribly sexist that language was, because of the person saying to me, girlf and not golf. My mother didn't see it as sexist at all.
Well, this is
so there's this wisdom of different roles, and the way nature works that has been largely obliterated from the experience of our society.
Well,
and yet we do remember it.
Your mom's worldview was formed before the 60s.
Right.
Okay. And that means she made the vow to honor and obey your dad at marriage. Okay. Generally speaking, after the 60s, the women not only took the head covering off for the first time in 1960 years, but with the head covering as a symbol of submission, they also refused to make the vow to honor and obey their husbands. So the 60s was a radical shift. Okay.
Okay.
And so the Methodist Church says we can't use the word husband and wife anymore. It's too offensive to some people. They're going to accommodate. People feel their feelings are offended.
Okay.
Because they're in a shack-up situation. They're not in a husband-wife relationship. So you got to just use the word partner. Now you don't know if the partners are married or not married. You don't know if they're male or female. You just got to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
So Christianity's been wiped out from underneath. It has the outward trimmings, but that's all you got left. So how do you deal with that's the world we live in? You know, how do you bring Christianity into a world where it's gone?
Well, it's not.
And you're trying to reorder things, because peace only comes from getting it ordered, and it can only be ordered according to Christianity's rules. Any other way to order it is false. Isn't that basically true?
Well, now, Peter, there's distinctions about different kinds of rules. So there are the 10 Commandments. Those are at the center, the Beatitudes, 10 Commandments. And then
we live in a culture whose legal system does not say violating those 10 Commandments are wrong. In other words, you can commit adultery, and the legal system says we see nothing wrong. You can't go to court and say, my wife committed adultery on me. The court's going to say, what are you doing here? Go and talk to your priest. That doesn't concern us as a nation, as a legal system. You can abort your child, or somebody can abort it, and you're going to go to court and say, I'm injured. My baby was killed. It was aborted, and they say it doesn't affect us. Doesn't murder? They can murder. I'm just saying that is our system. It doesn't honor the 10 Commandments. That's my whole point. It doesn't honor any aspect of Christianity, and we've been gutting it like crazy all along. Now, how do we cope in a system like that and bring peace? Because our system refuses to order things properly. And therefore, you can't have peace. You're up against the court system, you're up against the legislative system, and the executive system that refuse to order things properly. They're not pursuing peace. You're going to have peace when people can commit adultery in the neighborhood? You're going to have peace when they can abort their babies? They can curse God out openly. You're going to have peace. They can break the first commandment, the second commandment, the third, the fourth. They can break them all, and you're going to have peace. And the system says nothing about it, doesn't even try to remedy it. The Notre Dame Law School is not even addressing it. They don't care. I'm just saying, these are the difficulties of trying to create peace.
Yeah. You're certainly enumerating a lot of difficulties.
And they're just going to say, you're a kumbaya, pie in the sky.
Yeah, some have said that.
So how do you get actual peace, not only in the home? You know what I mean? Can you expect peace in the home if you're not having devotions, if you're not disciplining your children when they need discipline, or discipline your wife when she needs discipline? Can you have order? When the wife's out of order, the children are out of order, can you have peace? According to Augustine's definition?
Well, look, love goes places that God can work through any situation.
But love
in the kingdom.
love is attached to holiness, and holiness is things ordered in God's way. That's holiness. And to break God's holiness and to order it different than His definition of holiness, that's not love. You violate the law of holiness, you are in violation of love, because they are locked together. So a lot of people claim love, and they're violating the law of holiness. That's not love.
Or it's not perfect love, it's imperfect love, or it's incomplete love.
Well, it's like the big controversy now. I saw that the black churches are complaining about the popes, and he's recognizing it's maybe a misunderstanding, but nevertheless, they're really mad that the pope gives the appearance of approval of blessing same-sex marriages. Okay.
And of course,
There's another story, but they're just saying, but this is what people are seeing, and this is how they're interpreting it, and, and they recognize that there may be more behind it. But most people aren't going to hear the explanation. They're just going to see the Pope is blessing same-sex marriage, and what people think is that looks loving, but it violates the law of holiness. That's my point.
Yeah, a friend of mine was attacked, a Catholic friend of mine, by her evangelical friends on this very point. And she wrote back to them, well, what about a chaplain in the prison system that a murderer comes to the chaplain and says, I want a blessing? Should the chaplain be willing to give a blessing? That's that was her way of responding to, because the blessing that the church document was talking about was not a marital blessing. It was not a convalidation of a marriage.
No, of course not. Of course not.
But
people don't know those nuances. The outsider looking in only sees that this is a couple that's actively committing acts of sodomy, claiming that, the law says it's fine. Okay, our legal system says, yeah, you can commit all the sodomy you want, and we don't say anything wrong with it. That's our legal system. And the Pope seems to be bowing to that and not standing up against this wicked system that gives approval to sin, which our whole legal system does. And people are tired of it. Can't the church stand up to these governmental entities that give approval to sin? Or do they just keep bowing?
I don't think the Pope is bowing to the governmental entities. I think the Pope is looking for ways to build relationships with people and bring them into the kingdom. That's a totally different kind of process.
Yeah, and that's a positive. But I'm just saying the negative is that a lot of people, maybe wrongly, maybe they just want to interpret it the way they want to interpret it. Because there's a lot of anti-Catholic feeling all over the place. So the anti-Catholic feeling,
it attaches itself to all kinds of different.
I understand
situations, and especially they like to ramp up anti-Catholic feeling when the church has to take a moral position of some kind. So they surround the effort of the church to make its moral case with all these other things. They did that very consciously in certain circles as they were dealing with the abuse crisis. The church has moral positions, and obviously the church's teaching is against abuse. And it's against a lot of things.
Well, the church's teaching it really can't change, okay?
The Ten Commandments.
It really can't change. So even the Pope can say whatever he wants. He's there to defend church teaching.
The church teaching is, it's bigger than any individual clergyman or whatever. That's true. And the Pope is meant to be the guarantor of orthodoxy. That's one of the titles you give the Pope.
Right. So the church's teaching on whether you can bless a same-sex marriage or not bless it is already a given.
And it still is given. It still is the case.
Yeah.
I mean...
But they're also in the business of evangelizing. And some people see this... of course, these groups don't like Catholics, generally speaking, in their history. So they're going to try to point a finger,
right,
and then try to look good about it. They're not trying to pick on them, but at the same time, they're not going to go deep enough to see where the Pope is coming from necessarily.
Right, and the important thing about mercy is doctrine. That's a very important point. That, in other words, you can't claim mercy apart from doctrine.
Right. No, that's
you said it a little differently, but I would agree with that. That code.
Love, Jesus said, is to keep His commandments, and of course, we have passed from death unto life because we love the brethren. So the commandment to love one another is the strongest burden on any Christian at all times.
Right.
Okay. But that's a love that's also constrained by the commandment to be holy at all times. So we have to be holy at all times and loving at all times, and that's why excommunication has to be within the discipline of the church, because you can't allow a serious violation of the law of holiness amongst the loving brethren. They can't allow it.
Yeah. Well,
you see the tension.
Yeah, I do see the tension.
You can't bring
There's always a tension.
You can't bring in two sodomites like what they used to say, and biblically say it, who claim that they love each other. Well, they may feel they love each other. I'm sure they have feelings of love, but feelings are not. They don't define love.
No, of course not. Love is an act of the will. The best definition of love is to will the good of another. And
the first commandment that Paul gives in the epistles is sexual purity. The first commandment to the Christians is to be sexually pure.
Well, that's because people, their weaknesses in that area get in the way of properly willing the good of others.
And Paul,
so he understood that.
And Paul, in all his epistles, is almost obsessed about sexual purity. He's like a radical Puritan on that issue. Now the question is, he can't be wrong, because this is the Holy Spirit writing, using Paul to write this.
Yeah.
So this is a crucial issue in the church, and the world has always known that. So any scandal, sexual scandal, is a huge issue.
Well, it's one of the huge issues.
Well, Paul seems to think it's really big.
Well, sure. But you know why? Because if you water down love with lack of holiness, then the definition of love gets screwed up.
Well, if somebody
it's so Jesus said, with the increase of lawlessness, love in most men's hearts will grow cold. That's, I think.
Well, the example would be, you have a daughter, and you're committed to take her down the altar with that white wedding dress,
mm-hmm.
and you're determined that your duty is to keep her chastity.
Mm-hmm.
And here some boy wants to take your daughter out on a date. Oh, but Mr. Zilke, I love your daughter. I love your daughter. It's all about love, Mr. Zilke. I've heard your sermons on love, and I am into that. Love. And then he takes your daughter out, and he argues love. And what happens? They love each other. Oh, yeah. And they loved each other so much that the holiness factor just fell off. You see the practical problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, and in other words, I know you love her, and because you love her so much, you're not allowed to take her out. Okay? Because I know you love her so much that you wouldn't even imagine violating her sexual purity. And since I could see you're a very weak person, you would gladly accept the fact that you're not going to take her out. Yeah, that's what you would tell him. Now, he doesn't want to hear that, but you're telling him the truth. And in the old days, the father would probably say no.
Mm-hmm.
But today, what do?
Today is quite different.
Yeah, the 60s. The 60s was when it really picked up speed.
Yeah.
Or after World War II.
Right. They call it the revolution, the sexual revolution.
Right, and the only reason we're bringing this up, because right now we're in the middle of the invasion of Gaza, which is horrendous. Okay, it seems like a violation of all laws that are out there. Excessive, disproportionate.
Yeah, even President Biden talked about that.
Right.
He used the word disproportionate.
Right. So
that's obvious. In other words, that's obvious to everyone.
But
or it should be if they're watching the news.
But when we were in Nabi Saleh on the West Bank, 2016, we had events going on all the time. And one time, I decided not to participate in the scheduled events, and I wanted to hang out with the elders who were outside and have lunch with them. I can't remember the specifics, but I do remember sitting down and talking to them. And I picked up to me, it wasn't hard to pick it up. They were concerned about Israeli oppression in the East Bank and the West Bank and how the settlers are being mistreated, but they were more concerned about their family and about Western influence knocking out the honor that their children would owe to their father and mother. They felt that the Western culture was stealing the hearts of their children away from their family, honoring them, okay? Which would include, obviously, the whole family picture, the right of the firstborn son. In other words, they have a system, okay, that you honor the right of the firstborn son, which was very Middle East, very scriptural, and we got rid of that. That's not in our culture. See, so we're bringing our culture into their family. That was the invasion that they were most scared of. So yeah, as bad as the Israeli oppression is, it's not necessarily hurting those families. They may be dying physically, but it's drawing them together. I'm just saying, it's not destroying them at the spiritual level. They were worried of the family being destroyed at the spiritual level. The corruption. And what I'm saying is that the Israeli oppression on Gaza is not necessarily corrupting the people.
Well, no, wait. War like this always corrupts people.
Okay.
You've got to be kidding.
Okay, so maybe it's got to the point that...
Come on, Peter.
Well...
what you're doing here is you're proposing a sort of moralistic approach.
No.
That's going to...
No, let's go back to 2016. That was their argument then. Okay, now... I'll grant you, you're probably right. Okay. Now this is creating... something way beyond 2016. I'm just saying then what they were concerned about. Okay. Now the oppression is it's just blinding and overwhelming. It's so disproportional that you can't think about anything else.
Right. Okay.
Okay. I'll back off on that and grant you that. I was trying to make their position in 2016, which was clear to me.
Well, yeah.
Because the oppression was minimal compared to now.
Well, and we weren't in Gaza. We were in the West Bank.
Right.
Remember that for the Palestinians, there's like 3 levels of life in Israel. One is if you're a Palestinian citizen of Israel proper, and that's like the best, like our tour guides were. And then the other would be the Palestinians that live in the West Bank. They live under... oppression, by oppression we mean occupation. And they've been occupied since 1967. And they're living under laws of occupation and so on. And then Gaza was completely sealed off. You could only get in and out of Gaza with Israel's permission. They don't have an airport. They don't have a seaport that's open. They're just, David Cameron of the United Kingdom, the conservative prime minister, called it an open-air concentration camp. That's how he described it.
I mean, back in 2016, you never even imagined going to Gaza. It was a big leap to go to the West Bank.
Right. We couldn't go to Gaza. It would have been too much. The only people who could go to Gaza would be aid workers, and they had to have special permission and all that. There were people who got in, journalists and so on, but no, certainly we wouldn't have gone as pilgrims.
But we
could get into the West Bank,
and they harassed us even then.
Well, you were there. I wasn't even there when you got harassed. What was that like? I wasn't in the bus when the IDF.
You were with.
I was staying at Bassem's, and I took a cab back later.
Right.
And I didn't have any trouble, but the bus
stopped the bus, and Judy and Kendra, who were
they were there too.
They just came on with their gun.
Yeah.
With their AK, and they were trying to act mean, and and going up and along the aisles of the bus, thinking that we were doing something suspicious, which apparently we were.
Well, in their eyes, I guess you were. I don't know. We were just visiting friends in the West Bank.
We also ended up being invited to one of the wealthiest guys in Palestine, right? Or
that was later, yeah. Manib, his home, they call it Bet Palestine, the House of Palestine, in Nablus, and we visited him. He was in his 80s at the time. Yeah, I mean, that was later on. So we were at Nabi Saleh, and then later on we went to Nablus and visited him. We met him on the top of the hotel in Jerusalem. We were looking at the supermoon that night.
And one of the people had a Trump hat on, and that drew in a conversation.
Right. He actually asked who was in charge of the pilgrimage, and the lady who did the portraits pointed to me. And he immediately asked me, this was in the hotel, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know he was like the richest Palestinian in the world or whatever he was. I didn't know. And he asked me, he said, if you were President Trump, what would you do to deal with this problem in Israel? And I had just been pondering that question largely because of my conversations and the presentations by Miko Peled.
Yeah, but just let's add in, Trump had just been elected.
Yeah, Trump had just been elected.
And that was a shock to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah, they didn't even know that he would be. That's right. And so he's asking, but he asked me like a hypothetical. And I didn't know exactly what to answer, but I looked at him and I said, you know something? What I would do? I would demilitarize all aid to Israel. I wouldn't give them any more military aid because clearly they're misusing it. Now that was in 2016. That was my judgment based on what I saw in Nabi Saleh and what I saw in the testimony of Miko Peled and Bassem Tamimi.
Well,
so I said that to Manib, and he was like shocked to hear that from an American.
But this is consistent with your whole history, because you've done a lot of research. I mean, it goes back to Senator Nye, but it also the research on with Kennedy and Dimona. Kennedy wanted to put a check on Israel and inspect their nuclear facilities.
Oh yeah, okay. That's getting into a lot of different things, but
by not giving them aid, you're not going along with the program.
I'm
just saying, you have to go along with the program. That's the pressure.
What I said was aid, plenty of aid. I'm all for aid. Build more hotels, build more pilgrimage sites, whatever. I mean, support the tourism. But the way they're using their military is problematic even then. That's what I said. So of course I was taking a radical position, I guess.
But it's the American.
As I look at that,
it's the American Christians who tend to they lean towards Zion, giving Israel a supernatural status, okay,
right,
a prophetic status, and they feel, as Schofield's notes keep saying, if you bless the Jews and you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. God will preserve your country.
I want to go on record right here and right now. I'm all for blessing the Jews. I think we need to bless the Jews. We need to love the Jews. This is, and
but you're saying
people, you don't love people by giving them. It's just your previous argument on fornication. You don't love people by
giving them what they want.
No,
Israel wants those weapons, and they'll threaten you to get them. But if you love Israel, you say no.
And that's what I hope. I hope people across the country wake up and stop this nonsense. I mean, it is nonsense. Okay? I've really prayed about this.
What's nonsense?
This process of not standing up to Israel and saying, we need a ceasefire now. We should have had a ceasefire yesterday.
Yeah, but the problem is the Democrats are more against Israel than the Republicans. If Trump wins, isn't he much more pro-Israel than Biden?
I think they're both pretty pro-Israel, at least from what I can tell.
The Democrats will speak out against Israel. The Democrats there are Democrats that'll go against Israel, and they're protesting what's happening, much more than the Republicans.
Okay. Well,
so if the Republicans win,
I happen to be from a Republican background, and I don't think this is about Democrat or Republican. I think it's a human issue. I think people, foreign policy is meant not to be partisan. Okay? That's why we have a president.
Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He's indicating that he's super pro-Israel.
I got that, Peter.
So if Israel, he's going to give more the green light for them to do what they feel they have to do.
Well, okay. The point is that whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, a progressive, a libertarian, a conservative, a liberal, this is a human issue. This is humanity crying out in Gaza. Look.
Is the solution simple in a way?
It is simple.
Okay, what is it?
You start out with a ceasefire. That's the start. And then you start negotiating rather than using military means to solve what is a political problem.
But they killed Jesus. They said we have to save our nation. And in order to save our nation, we're willing to kill the Messiah. Because they kind of knew he was the Messiah. They didn't care. So they're being as radical as they were with Jesus. We're going to kill the Messiah to save the nation. To save Israel, we got to invade Gaza. Isn't that kind of what they're thinking? We don't care. This is what we feel we have to do.
I got it. But the point is that they're violating every
they don't care.
Canon.
They have to survive. Survival of the fittest. They have to survive, and this is what we have to do to survive, and it doesn't matter. Well, isn't that what they're thinking?
I'm sure they're thinking that because they've been triggered by fear. Father Hesburgh said, fear is a very bad counselor.
No, they don't want to not exist.
They fear non-existence, but that's not the case. Don't you think there's Palestinians, many of them, who are willing to negotiate this? There are.
Well, Stonewall Jackson said to Robert Louis Dabney in 1863, when Dabney saw that the South couldn't win, he said, Minister, or however he called Dabney, I do not wish to survive the independence of my country. In other words, I'm going down with the independence of my country. That's it. There is no life apart from the Confederacy. And Israel is thinking, no, we have to stand. We're not going. We have to exist, and we have to exist the way we want to exist. Either we get our freedom or we don't. They want their freedom.
Well, so do the Palestinians.
Yeah, but Israel comes first because they're a chosen people. That's the point. They're more important than the Palestinians in their mind. Don't they believe that?
Some of them do, I guess. Some of them don't.
Most of them do, don't they? Because if you kill 10, for every Israeli killed, how many do they feel they have to kill of them?
I don't know.
There is we're talking about being disproportionate. We're talking about killings.
Yeah, I know.
That's what they mean by disproportionate, isn't it?
Yes, of course.
So they feel their lives are more important than the Palestinian lives.
Well, and that, yeah, that's where I get off the bus, because all lives are important.
Right. So you're saying the Israelis are wrong.
Right. Well, they're wrong in that regard. But my correction of a person who's Jewish or Israeli as being wrong is not anti-Semitic. And I want to give an example of this. When I heard that the Gaza YMCA had been bombed, I remember a story that happened in the South Bend YMCA. They had an elderly man who used a lot of garlic. And he used so much garlic that the people exercising with him and the people in the showers could not stand it. And they complained to him about his smell, his stink. And they called on the head of the YMCA to talk to him. And so he did. And the man bristled. He was an elderly Jewish man. And he said, "You're anti-Semitic to tell me this. And the people in this YMCA are anti-Semitic." It's a true story. And so he left, and he told everybody how anti-Semitic the YMCA was. He happened to go to his dentist, who was also Jewish, and he opened his mouth to get the dental treatment, and the dentist screamed at him, "Get out of here. You stink." And it turned out that the dentist was Jewish, so the Jewish man went back to the head of the YMCA and said, "You're not anti-Semitic. My Jewish dentist told me I stank, and I've stopped using the garlic." And he joined his friends again at the YMCA, and everybody lived happily ever after. The point is, what the head of the YMCA said is, "I am not anti-Semitic. I'm not into anti-Semitism. I'm anti-stinkism. And what they're doing in Gaza stinks." Okay? That's the problem. Okay? It stinks.
But
it's not about Judaism and Islam and Christianity. It's not about religion. It's about human dignity. It's about the needs of those people to have electricity, water, a port that's open, an airport that's open.
But we're talking about a government, U.S. government, I believe that they've enacted a law.
Yes.
To the effect, or I don't know what it was, some kind of law to the effect that to criticize Zionism is equal to anti-Semitism.
And that's a mistake.
Did they do that?
Yes, they have in certain...
Who did it?
Situations.
Who did that?
States have done it.
Did the U.S. Congress do it?
And then there's been some resolutions in the U.S. Congress about it. Yes. So maybe even what I'm saying here could be interpreted that way if they want to. But I'm not making this about religion.
Don't a lot of Jews in Israel oppose what's being done?
Some do, and a lot of Jews in the United States do.
Right. So a lot of Jews are against Zionism to a degree.
Well, sure. They're not anti-Jewish, they're anti-Zionist.
Right, Miko Peled.
Miko Peled is one of the more famous ones, okay? But there are others, and there are some religious Jews and some non-religious Jews, but they're anti-Zionist from the point of view that they don't see Zionism as a political solution.
It defines Zionism again. It's always good to refresh the definition.
Well, the definition is depends on who you ask.
Yeah, but it's important to know what the definition is. How do you define Zionism?
Well, Zionism is a political movement that looked to a Jewish ethno-state as the solution to the problem of the world situation with Jewish people.
And the two forces were, one was Christians, and the one other group, the main group, was atheist.
Well,
I'm just saying, the Jewish Zionists tend to be communist atheist at their core, or atheist, and the ones emerging with the atheist Jews were the Christian Zionists.
Yeah, they have a political marriage of convenience, I guess.
Right, so you have Christians in America that believe America was raised up to help raise up Israel. But the problem with Israel is that they tend to be atheist.
Well, no, look, again, I'm just saying,
it's a strange union. That's all we're looking at.
Well, it is a strange union, and it's definitely been problematic from the point of view of lots of things, obviously. I didn't really expect to go into a long digression on Zionism here. I could have been prepared for that.
But that's what we're dealing with in Gaza.
Well, we're dealing with a lot of forces. And Zionism is certainly a big political part of this. A certain kind of Zionism that is expressed in real radical ways and violent ways. Okay? I mean, so, I don't know. It seems to me that in order to get to peace, you got to replace war with jaw. That's what, in other words, it's better to negotiate toward peace than it is to think that you're going to get peace at the edge of a sword.
In other words, try to establish, is there any way to talk?
Yeah. And of course, right now, people feel there's no way. And so the way I see that, that's hell. Hell is the condition whereby people are just shouting out of their silos in their place in hell, and no one really hears anybody else. It's like Dante.
Yeah, because we know we have passed from death into life because we love the brethren, and when we love, God is there. God is love, and loving the brethren brings in God.
Right.
So, and you have to talk first. You have to connect. Okay, so.
Right, and what we see is a lot of disconnected speech that's just poured over people in violent
because
ends.
you can't have hatred. Hatred is a murder, and you're not going to have eternal life. So, but this is Peter Helen, Gus Ilke on the show Israel.